to welcome you. It is Canadian Bioethics Week, which is hosted by the Canadian Bioethics Society, which is a national organization that has a lot of mostly clinical ethicists and academics that are part of it. And we've been interested in our connection and wanted to very strategically host this conversation today during Canadian Bioethics Week. So that's how we came up with this date. And I really have to give full affirmation to my colleague, Lynn Musto, who's what is the heart and the brains behind this, pulling a panel together like this on Bioethics Week. So thank you. And I'm going to introduce each of our speakers just before they speak. So I'll have a little transition between each of our speakers to make sure we're clear about what perspective they're coming in and that you know a little bit about them. So what happened? I would say June 2016 was a very large social shift in Canada. Perhaps one of the largest social shifts really for decades, maybe in our lifetime. We'll see this as one of the laws that has brought about one of the largest changes to Canadian society when the euthanasia law was overthrown in the Supreme Court in February of 2015. They were given a year to come up with new legislation and had a bit of an extension during that time. And the new legislation was voted, then it's referred to as Bill C-14, and that was voted on and passed in June of 2016. I want to tell you that when that was under debate, the final debate in the House of Commons and then the readings through Senate, our nursing graduate program was there. So the Masters of Science in Nursing program was in Ottawa during that week when the final vote happened. And we were caught in a lot of conversations. The feel in much of our conversation was in Ottawa was, yes, of course this is going through, and maybe the bill isn't as liberal as it should be. It shouldn't be. There's too many checks and balances in the law, in the bill, is what a lot of our conversations were. But when we thought about it, it was really quite remarkable because the Minister of Health and the Justice Minister who were shepherding this bill through, it's quite a remarkable story. I think it's all part of the Canadian context. The Minister of Health herself is a physician who is a Christian physician, so she was speaking into the health side of the bill. And the lawyer who's leading the Minister of Justice, who's here from Vancouver, she is a woman of Aboriginal heritage and has very deep spiritual roots herself. So I thought it was providential in its way that this bill, while we may have different opinions in the room about the bill, it seemed providential that these were the two women that were shepherding, in a sense, midwifing this bill for us and bringing it through. So I'm just going to run through really quickly to just remind us of what the bill is. So it's called an assisted dying law that includes those who are suffering intolerably, that's some words that are hard to say, suffering intolerably, but excludes those whose death is not reasonably foreseeable. So those are two kind of terms that are quite important to this. We need to know that then it's for people who are eligible for health services in Canada, so they put that in so we can't have tourists coming up to avail themselves of the service. You have to be 18 years old, and capable of making decisions. And so there's a youth clause there, so you can't have any minors. And that is probably something that's going to be opened up as this bill is challenged in various ways. But for now, it's 18 years of age and older. And it is then for persons with grievous and irremediable medical conditions. And so that also is going to probably be challenged in different ways about what falls under that category. And that natural death is reasonably foreseeable. So here they're really trying to say is you can't say 10 years from now, on this day is the day I picked to die, right? So it's the idea that you need to have a condition where your death is reasonably foreseeable. And there are some other safeguards. You have to have a voluntary request, so we can't, it's very clear that we still cannot counsel somebody to choose this, so it always has to be a voluntary request. The safeguard is that there's an analysis also by 2 independent practitioners. There's a waiting period, although I'm hearing different things about how those 10 days are being enacted, and that there is a series of assessments that need to be done. So with this bill, then I think to say that overall there was, when I say that these two women midwives this bill through our parliament, there was a concern for balancing the rights of people who are suffering with the rights and obligations of society to protect people who are suffering. I think there's a real tension here, is that what is the autonomous right of a person to make a choice? Is our right as society? What is our obligation as society to care for all in our charge? So we decided it would be fantastic then, as part of Bioethics Week, to have a conversation about this. I think this is one of the things about how quickly this bill seemed to land on us as Canadians. It felt like there wasn't very much opportunity for conversation and dialogue about this, and there are a lot of conversations happening now, maybe more, but probably still not enough. So we just see this as one opportunity to have a conversation as we are now living out this reality. So what we thought is, if we could hear from our colleagues from different disciplines about how medical assistance in dying might be viewed from their perspective. And the idea is not necessarily, in some ways, that we are in a new reality, so it doesn't do us much good to have a lot of debate about should we have this law, because the point is we actually do have this law. But if we do, so we may land on some of the conversation about that, but we also want to think through, what does this mean? What are, from our different disciplinary perspectives, what are ethical issues, so it's Ethics Week, what are ethical issues from our disciplinary perspectives that come forward now that medical assistance in dying is a reality for us? And what does that bring up for us? So I'm going to start by introducing Dr. Paul Chamberlain, and he's going to start off our panel from a philosophic perspective. I don't know if you can read the words there, but he's our philosopher. Welcome, Paul. And he's the director of the Institute for Christian Apologetics at Trinity Western University here at ACTS. And he has taught ethics and philosophy, religion, Christian apologetics for many years now, so you can read his bio here. What I did want to draw out to your attention is that book, Paul, Final Wishes, you wrote about this many years ago, and I think you also have shifted from a more sort of theoretical, philosophic discussion now to something that is reality for us. So let's welcome Paul.
Okay, thank you very much, Sheryl. And thanks for having me on this panel. It's quite an honor to be here. I think we're going to have a lot of fun, but it's also a real honor to be here working with all these colleagues here. I think that I'm really looking forward to it. The issue today, of course, is more than just a merely academic one, and we all know that. When you come at it from the way I've been coming at it over the years, you tend to see it as that because you're in the world of academia, and I have my PhD in philosophy, and one of my areas of specialization was ethics, and this is one issue that I was thrust into. But it's more than that. It's a very emotional issue because it deals with life and death. It deals with real people, real suffering. You can't get away from that, and you see that really soon as you get into it in any way more than just opening the books. If you get out there and discuss it and meet with people, you find that right off the bat. And people can get very passionate about stuff like this. It's also a very divisive issue. It almost doesn't matter where you go. You'll find people who might agree on many other things, but they will find themselves with great disagreement on this issue. So I always say there's a need for what I call compassionate clarity on an issue like this. My own story was I learned very early that the issue is not merely academic. My own mother contracted MS, multiple sclerosis, at the age of 39. It's about the time, just a little bit before the time I was getting my degree, my own PhD, and getting involved in these issues. And I saw her over the years from age 39 up to age 73 when she finally died of the disease in 2003, go from being a very vibrant, energetic person to over time losing use of her fingers, first of all, having numbness in her face that was the first sign, and then losing use of her arms, and then her legs, and then the quality of her life was affected greatly. After a certain amount of time, there was no hugging of her kids or grandkids anymore, no helping around the house. She was the one who needed help for everything, and I mean everything. Eventually she couldn't communicate with us, and over time I really didn't think she could even recognize us. And then she lived on 3 or 4 more years like that, and eventually came to the point where she died. And I looked at that and I thought, wow, it's no wonder some people want to die. And I heard many people who you would be surprised if I told you some of them, who said, why isn't there a way to give her a lethal injection and let this thing be over? And it's people like this who sometimes do ask to die. Now, as I got into the issue, I began to realize, well, you can't go too far without things like definitions. Of course, philosophers love definitions. And we figure you can't get very far without definitions. And also looking for foundational questions and all that. The interesting thing about this issue is the terminology keeps changing on us. We used to talk about euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide. That term stuck around for quite a while. And then I heard that term was no longer the accepted one. It was physician-assisted death. I actually preferred physician-assisted suicide because at least it explicitly said you have to want to die before you get it. Suicide said that. Death just was left that open. But now that's not the term either, of course. It's medical assistance in dying. Those other terms all had definitions, careful definition. Medical assistance in dying, to tell you the truth, I think it's still in process of being defined. We'll see how it's defined. But for the time being, we can take it probably as a replacement term for physician-assisted death or suicide. But as I say, over the years, the most common term was euthanasia. And the interesting thing about the word euthanasia, it comes from a couple of Greek words, so many of us in this room know that. One word means good or easy. The other one means death. Put those two together, and you have the idea, or the hope, excuse me, which was present in this word from the beginning, that maybe we can take some steps to make the process of dying less painful or maybe better than it otherwise would be for people who are suffering. That was the idea behind the word euthanasia from the beginning. But let me just go on here and get a few things on the table about the definitions, because I have found a lot of confusion over these terms. Physician-assisted suicide, death, medical assistance in dying. Let me set out three things here to begin with that do not qualify as physician-assisted suicide or death, and maybe medical assistance in dying, that sometimes are assumed by people to be that. The first one is this: the right to refuse medical treatment. I hear it all the time. People say, well, you know, there's euthanasia happening in those hospitals all the time. And I say,